What's good, YouTube? Storm here, coming at you guys in another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the updated ban list. So this was an interesting time for them to drop this. They never really dropped the ban list on a Saturday, particularly in the middle of a big YCS. But they did. This is actually interesting timing. I'll take what I can get. And it does take effect like straight before the Houston Regional in June, so I will take this list definitely. But we'll go ahead and get straight into it. So the first card we see banned here is Cyberstein. This is a card I did call for it to be banned. I'm kind of glad to be correct on this one. Super Heavy is already a really strong deck without being able to search Cyberstein with Gear X and then put an Exterio on top of everything else. There were also some niche combos where you could make the Gimmick Puppet Link monster, then use Cyberstein to bring Albion, the Incandescent Dragon, the new one from Cyberstorm Access, to Gimmick Puppet lock your opponent on top of everything else. Probably shouldn't have come back. I think it was just an experiment because sometimes Konami just likes to bring old cards back. Definitely glad to see this banned. It was a pretty annoying. It was just on top of everything else the deck does. It was, and it's definitely. I think it's going to stay banned permanently, hopefully. So as we're scrolling down the list, these are so no that's the only new banned monster as far as just regular monster. So extra deck wise, so there's a new. So this is a Super Heavy Samurai Link 1. If you're completely unfamiliar with the card, basically it's just a Link 1 that needs a Super Heavy monster, and you can discard a card to special summon a monster back. This is a pretty big hit on the deck. It's one of the, just because you could just normal summon a Soul Piercer, and then link into this. Soul Piercer gets a search, and then on top of that, you can then use its effect to revive the Soul Piercer to a zone it points to, then getting a second search. So it was a search and then another search. So this is an interesting ban. I think it was probably a correct one if they were going to touch something in Super Heavy and not hit Soul Piercer. This is definitely a strong hit on the deck. Now, are there any Link 1 replacements? I can't tell you, but you definitely can't make Al Mirage with Soul Piercer because of its 1200 attack. So definitely a hit on the deck and probably necessary. Moving down, a big one, I think everyone was calling this one, which was number 89, Diabolos the Mind Hacker. This was the enabler of the stupid zone lock that Kistira does. I think it's pretty obvious that this was one that most people predicted this one. This was a pretty obvious call. Getting rid of it means that Kastira can still lock a little, but they can't do, entire locks of entire fields. So I think this was definitely... And it also opens up people to start playing, one of extra deck monsters again. Obviously, Unicorn still exists, but it does remove that big aspect where if they go full combo and you see a Diablosis, you basically either had to let them know what you were playing or scoop it up right there. So this removes that aspect and opens up a little more options for deck building. Now you don't have to play 2 Zeus if you don't want to, which I think is good, particularly with how expensive Zeus is now. So this is a pretty nice hit, I think. It's something people called for. We have some new trap bans. So a pointer, this card it's basically, people compare it to Trashed Up Shoot, and I think that's fair. Yes, they do technically get the card back, but the fact that this just gives free hand knowledge for very little cost, knocks a card out of your opponent's hand before they even really get the chance to play. And, things like Trashed Up Shoot and these kind of hand targeting cards you can basically snipe out your opponents out to your board, so it's probably a healthy ban. Expulsion was another one I called for. I've seen some people confused about this hit. I'm not sure why. Expulsion. The issue with Expulsion is that it can summon things from the banished pile as well as the graveyard, unlike the new Albion Dragon from Cyberstorm Access. This grabs stuff from the banished pile, and that matters because it limits if you summon 2 things from the banished pile, it can't be ghost spelled. You can't stop the interaction with a Bestial, for example. There's very little that can stop it outside of cross out and expulsion. I think if we're getting into that kind of territory, the card probably should be banned. It also helps Konami's sales because this new set just dropped with a similar kind of card, and the new Albion is obviously useful in other ways, but I do think this was probably the correct move. And those are all the ban cards. That's 5 new ban cards added. Definitely think they did the correct ones here. So yeah, so Blasters off the list. This was a big one. Everyone pretty much called with the new Volcanic and Fire set coming out. This is probably going to get reprinted in there. It's been off of every other format, not doing anything. It's arguably the worst Dragon Ruler. So yeah, I have like no problem with Blaster coming off the list. Circular, this was the one that I saw. I was a little confused, but Circular really is an insanely good card. Like, it does everything for Mathmech. I compared it to Altergeist Multifaker, where there was Mathmech, and then there was Mathmech with Circular, similar to with Altergeist and Multifaker. This card does so much with just one card, and I think it makes sense to put it to 1. It's still pretty accessible. They already play things like Cybernet Mining and obviously to search as well as Small Worlds, but limiting it definitely is a hit on the deck. It's not surprising. It was just something I didn't see coming really, but I'm not going to complain. It's, one card enablers that are highly searchable are definitely a thing. Miscellaneousaurus was something I called. It's still at the limited section. So yeah, Gamma is actually going to 1. So this is an interesting hit on Super Heavy Samurai. The biggest problem with that deck was that you kind of had to play Russian roulette with when you hand trap them, because if they had a no monster, for example, if they activate a Wakaushi and you ogred them, they gamma you take a pretty big L there because your ogre doesn't resolve and they get to go full combo. So this is definitely a hit on Super Heavy as well. It means that things like you don't have to play a guessing game because I don't think, you really have to account for that one of Gamma. If they have it, if they play it still and they have it, they have it. But I think that this definitely removes that annoying aspect of Super Heavy Samurai where you kind of had to play around Gamma on top of finding the correct spot to hand trap them. So now things like Golem Lockbird and Ghost Ogre will be a lot more effective against the deck because they won't have 3 copies of Gamma in their deck. So I think that's definitely an interesting hit. Denglong is back. This was the most excited part. I'm glad to finally see Denglong come off the list. I've been calling for it for several lists, but I'll take it better late than never. I do think, though, that as strong as Denglong is, we've kind of removed on from the time where it was good in Dino. We don't have a Calamities anymore. Dino doesn't really play Elio anymore to even summon it. If they play other tuners, it's usually Scrap Raptors, so I don't think this is going to help Dinos all that much. There might be some Sword Soul variants that people lab and come up with. The card is still incredibly strong. It's, a negate that floats into a negate if you play a couple cards in your deck, so still strong, obviously, but 1 is, it's nice to have it back. I don't think it's going to rock the format, but I won't complain about a card I've been asking to come back off the list. Arise Heart Limit is interesting. This definitely limits a lot of their grind game. It's a card that I can see an argument for banning it at some point down the line. Obviously, Konami's still got product to sell, so they're not going to ban it. But it's a lot like Colossus, but it also has an effect to respond to things. So it definitely is a card that should be on the ban list, in my opinion. And limiting it definitely is going to make some mirror matches for the deck very miserable because they can just cluck your Arise card right out of the extra deck. So, yeah, interesting. I think it's a card that definitely is really strong. I can see an argument for banning it, honestly. But I do think that I'll take extra hits on Castria. Thank you, please. Pearly Delicious Memory. Now, I've only played against Pearly once at local, so I'm actually going to pull the card up right now. But Pearly is a deck that I think this is a preemptive hit because Pearly is a deck that is kind of hanging around. It's not. You can see in the OCG, it's one of the better decks to the point that people are literally playing cash for it against it. So this is an E-Telly. Okay, so like limiting this definitely hurts the deck a lot because E-Tellys are obviously fantastic, but putting it to 1 definitely hurts. And it's It also has battle protection, which does matter because let's say you get something big enough to get over their Noir and they have this, well, you're kind of just SOL. So it also means that you have things like DD Crow, for example, are going to get better against the deck because you can get their when you can banish their memory so they can't keep attaching it. And on top of that, this attack and defense gain that it benefits to a monster means that if you crow it, the monsters won't be quite as big. So being able to putting this to 1 is a strong hit on Pearly. Make no mistake about it. The deck I think will still hang around a little, but this is a pretty strong hit because not only are you putting their E-Tally to 1, you're also it does a lot of other things for the deck. It's definitely a hit, no mistake about it. And the final limited card is actually Naturia's Sacred Tree. This obviously it does feel a little bit like Naturia is dying for runic sins. I would prefer runic hits honestly, but Sacred Tree is a pretty damn good card. It's a not once per turn search. Anytime it hits the graveyard, search. So limiting it definitely puts that deck in a weaker position. Is it a card I think that should be on the ban list? Personally, I would much rather see more runic cards on the list personally, but I think this is definitely a big hit to Naturia Runic, which is a deck that's not meta, but it's been hanging around. So we are moving to the semi-limit section. I've said this for years. The Malicious is the only card that should be here, but it's always a section for cards where Konami is like, we don't think this is a problem, but we're going to put it here. So we're getting an extra copy of Herald of the Orange Light. I don't think this is really... Honestly, it could have probably gone to 3. I think we're kind of out of the tier. Tier's obviously very neutered. But having an extra copy is pretty nice for those... for decks like Drytron, people might still be playing. It's obviously a Ben 10 target, which is nice. But we are kind of with the Ishizu cards limited. I honestly don't think this is an issue. Unicorn going to 2, I mean, this is a very, very, very slight hit on Kashtira consistency. They still have 3 field spell, still have 3 everything else is still at 3. Birth still at 3. Spoiler, but obviously, but it's not here, obviously. So, but this is a very, very slight hit. This very much feels like a slap because of future reprints, because obviously the Darkwing Blast is in the Megatons, so they didn't want to put it to 1 to hurt potential reprints. So definitely Lightning Storm was a weird one. It's definitely been a pretty popular side deck card, but it is also a thrust target, which is a card that, and while it's a pretty flexible card, obviously going second because it can clear monsters as well as back row. But I don't understand why it's here because it's primarily a side deck going second card. Pot of Desires is still at 2 for some reason. Can we get 3, please? Fountain is at 2. I said on my ban list prediction this should go to 1. Semi doesn't really do anything when they still have, all the cards that search Hugin. For Fountain, it's a very, very slight hit. Engage, this was one a lot of people were, honestly, I did not expect them to bring Engage back to 2. But I think Sky Strikers are they're in a slightly better place with the Ishizu Shufflers limited, but I think it's a bit rough for the deck because if you look at things like obviously Kashtira is just an unwinnable matchup for the deck unless you open Widow Anchor and Perm, but you also have to consider things like Bestials, which could possibly end up more into side decks with this list. But I won't deny, like, it's nice to have an extra copy of Engage. My playset still sits in the binder. Starter to 2 isn't really like a huge sprite hit, obviously. But it's potentially like could be more hits on it in the future. We'll have to see when the Power of the Elements cards get reprinted. But it's a slight hit on sprite, very, very minor. Then Unlimited, so Cloak. Obviously, like now it's once per duels, but like not an issue. Birdman's been on the list for a while. I know there's some kind of loopy old FTK with this thing, but like it's not going to do anything in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. Lotus is off the list. This was part of an FTK using Topologic Bomber Dragon, which is a card no one really plays anymore. It's fine. Quick Fix to 3 is nice. It's good, but I don't think Spiral is going to be competitive until with Master Plan permanently should be banned. Definitely nice because now you have plenty of things to machine dupe, which is great. But Spiral's in a pretty weak spot without Master Plan. Master Plan really was the card that tied the whole deck together, and it's probably never getting unbanned. So, but quick fix to 3 is not terrible. Starling to 3, it's nice. To 3, obviously, for bird up players and people play those decks. Face off to 3 is interesting. I'm never going to complain about getting some pendulum tools off the list. It's been limited for a very, very long time, and Konami's kind of almost felt like Konami forgot about it. But it is a free body for pendulum decks, and those decks, and getting you to beyond the pendulum with just this and any other monster is pretty nice. I just have to wonder, like, with the Draco stuff, like, if it's really worth playing a full Draco engine anymore, really. Like, I have to ask. But because the cards really getting it off face off is nice, but they don't do a ton on their own. So it'll be interesting. I think the card's nice. Multi-rolls off the list up to 3. It's been limited for a while, but it is a very, very powerful card. Being able to turn all your Sky Striker cards to unresponded to, on top of being able to constantly recycle and reset things, is really, really nice. And I won't complain about getting the card back to 3. So how do I like this list? I'm pretty happy with it. I think there's obviously some things that weren't addressed. No list is going to be perfect, but they did hit some of the big problematic, annoying things in the format, and did a couple light hits on some decks that were kind of hanging around on the fringe. They weren't too powerful. But I think it's going to be a pretty similar format, just the decks at the top end will be a little bit weaker. I think Branded is in a really good spot, only really losing Expulsion. Cashier is still very playable. All the consistency cards are still at 3. It's just a lot of their stupid stuff has been toned down, but they still have 3 Birth. They still have 3 Field Spell. And then obviously Super Heavy Samurai did take some pretty big hits here, but I still think the deck's going to find a way to hang around. It'll just be a lot easier to combat, which is good. But I think those 3 decks are still going to probably be the top tier decks, with a few fringe things kind of hanging around. We'll have to see. But anyway, guys, that it comes to the end of the video today. What you guys think of this new ban list down in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Swarstorm signing out.